Kale Draven never thought explaining car engines to aliens would land him in a royal marriage. Stellaris Junction pulsed with the sound of dozens of languages, alien music, and the low hum of starships parked outside the hub. Inside the Earth Pavilion, Kale leaned on the table of a makeshift engine display, his voice hoarse from 8 hours of translating combustion theory into simple terms for anyone with enough tentacles or translators to care. In Austin, he was just another broke mechanic. But out here, surrounded by creatures who could navigate wormholes but couldn't grasp a spark plug, he was suddenly an expert. He left the exhibit, weaving past floating jellyfish tourists and multicolored banners. His stomach growled. The station commissary offered food that tasted like soggy cardboard dipped in mineral water. He needed real flavor, something warm, spicy. That's when he saw it, a crimson booth glowing with rotating alien script. The sign floated above it in flickering gold, Gravi Chili, a taste that defies gravity. Behind the counter stood a creature that looked like a walking cactus, and a praying mantis had a baby. Despite its alien form, it smiled, or at least Kale thought it did. "You seek flavor," it said in a gravelly voice. "You seek Gravi Chili. Human tongues adore capsaicin. Is it safe for humans?" Kale asked, stepping closer. "Engineered precisely for your kind. First taste is free." Cultural exchange. The vendor offered a small bowl. Kale stared at the contents. The chili didn't sit in the bowl. It hovered, pulsing, glowing blue, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Curiosity overpowered caution. He dipped the weird spoon into the floating swirl and took a bite. A firework went off behind his eyes. Spicy, sweet, smoky, tangy, and something else, something like memory. For a moment, he swore his feet left the ground. His mouth dropped open. "That was incredible," he said. The vendor beamed or changed color. "You like? You may buy. Simple contract. Standard waiver. Just touch the glowing line." Kale, still dazed, blinked at the floating form. Alien text shimmered. He couldn't read it, but he'd signed countless electronic waivers in his life. Allergies, risks, food reactions. He shrugged, pressed his finger to the line. The form dissolved in a golden flash. Suddenly, the vendor pulled a curtain aside, revealing a shining corridor lined with armored guardstall, purple-skinned beings in living metal armor. Each carried a glowing spear. Music blasted from unseen speakers. The crowd parted. "What the hell?" Kale muttered. A woman emerged from the corridor, tall and glowing with authority. Her skin shimmered like dark violet under moonlight, and silver hair floated around her head like a halo. Behind her stood another woman similar in build, younger, more reserved, with striking silver eyes. The older woman stepped forward. "I am Empress Sarah of the Zepyrian Empire. You have honored us, human. The genetic contract has been accepted. My daughter shall now wed." Kale blinked. "What? No. I just wanted chili." The vendor bowed deeply. "You signed the royal binding of consortship and genetic merging." Kale took a step back. "You tricked me into a marriage contract." "No trick," said the Empress calmly. "Your signature is legally binding under galactic law." The younger woman, apparently the princess, stepped forward, face flushed in horror. "Mother, what have you done? You are infertile. Our family line cannot end. The human genome is compatible. Desperate times require bold action." Kale rubbed his temples. "Look, I fix cars. I'm not here to start an empire." The Empress beamed. "Even better. Humble, strong, earthborn. You're perfect." Guards flanked Kale before he could argue. The vendor handed him a glowing token. "For the wedding feast," it said helpfully, as a strange royal procession swept him down the corridor, led by a shocked princess, and cheered on by confused aliens. Kale caught sight of his cousin pushing through the crowd. "Kale," she yelled, panic in her eyes. "What did you do?" He held up the glowing chili token helplessly. "I just wanted a snack." but he was already being carried toward something far bigger than a snacka ceremony, a dynasty, and a life he never asked for, and that was only the beginning. The Zephyrian royal shuttle hummed through orbit, slicing past shimmering satellites and crystalline defense rings as it descended toward the planet below. Cale pressed his face to the viewport, staring in disbelief at a world that looked like it had been painted by a surrealist with a love for purple, oceans, and floating mountains. Beside him, the Princess Valera, as he'd learned, sat stiffly in her seat, spine straight, eyes distant. She hadn't spoken to him since the wedding ceremony, which had involved more lasers and chanting than he'd ever thought possible. So, Cale said awkwardly, "Do you guys do this often? Trick strangers into royal marriages with chili?" Booth's Valera didn't look at him. "No, only when our empress gets desperate. Lucky me." The shuttle banked hard as they neared a massive gleaming palace nestled between levitating peaks. Spires curved inward, floating walkways pulsed with light, and gravity seemed to ignore every rule he'd grown up with. "That's your home?" he asked. "That's our prison," she muttered under her breath, then added louder, "Yes, the imperial residence." They landed in a vast courtyard surrounded by courtiers, guards, and shimmering holographic banners bearing the royal crest. Cale was ushered into a private chamber, part bedroom, part living museum. Furniture shifted shapes when he touched it. The ceiling displayed alien constellations that moved as he walked. His new quarters were nicer than any hotel he'd ever stayed in, but they felt like a cage. The next morning, he woke to find a ceremonial scroll floating above his bed. Ornate lettering spiraled across it in glowing blue script. "The bonding ritual begins at first moonfall. Attendance required." An attendant entered without knocking. He was tall, purple-skinned like Valera, with glowing tattoos crawling across his forehead. "The exalted consort shall prepare." Cale sat up. "For what?" "Look, I think there's been a mistake. I'm not really royal material." The attendant smiled politely. "And yet you wear the mark of union. The bonding ritual is sacred. It aligns life forces for optimal fusion." "Fusion," Cale repeated. "Is that code for babies?" The attendant nodded gravely. "Yes." Later that night, Cale was led to a chamber that looked like it belonged in a dream or a fever hallucination. The walls were made of translucent crystal, reflecting light in infinite angles. The floor rippled like liquid mercury, but supported his steps. And at the center stood Valera, dressed in silver and violet robes, her indigo hair coiled like a galaxy, her expression unreadable. "You clean up nice," he said, then winced. "Sorry, Earth compliment. Probably weird here." Valera's gaze softened slightly. "It's acceptable." Attendants surrounded them and began chanting. The air buzzed with harmonic frequencies that made Cale's skin tingle. Then Valera began to sing. Her voice wasn't human, too clear, too layered, but it stirred something deep in Cale's chest. He joined in, not knowing the tune, but following her lead. Somehow, his voice fit. The room brightened, the crystals pulsed. "You resonate more strongly than expected," Valera whispered. "Good or bad? Unusual." The second phase involved something called quantum honey, served in a glowing orb, suspended midair. They were instructed to feed it to each other. Cale hesitated, but Valera had already scooped a spoonful and held it to his lips. The moment it hit his tongue, the world melted. He felt her, not just beside him, but inside. Her sadness, her longing, the years of disappointment, the fear that she was broken. All of it flooded through him like electricity. His knees nearly gave out. She stared at him, breathing hard, her eyes wide. "You felt that?" He nodded, barely able to speak. They fed each other in silence, the bond growing thicker with each bite, until neither of them could look away. The final phase was gravitational massage therapy, which Cale had assumed would be awkward, but it wasn't. They lay side by side on the soft metal floor as waves of gravity pressed and lifted their bodies. relieving tension in ways no massage chair ever could. Valera let out a quiet breath, her shoulders relaxing. For the first time. You know, Cale said, this is the weirdest thing I've ever done, but also kind of amazing. You're not what I expected, she said softly. I get that a lot. She turned her head toward him. My mother thinks you're a savior. He rolled his eyes. I'm just a guy who likes engines and chili. Valera hesitated, then said, and yet, I don't feel broken around you. That hit harder than he expected. He reached out and took her hand gently. Maybe, he said, you were never broken to begin with. She didn't respond, but she didn't pull her hand away either. Outside the chamber, fireworks exploded above the palace, celebrating the first step of a union that no one, not even the couple themselves, understood. And deep inside Valera's body, something sparked, silent and small, but growing. The palace woke with a buzz that morning. Not from politics or visiting dignitaries, but from whispers. Servants exchanged glances in the halls. Holograms glitched with excitement. The Empress glided through the corridors, humming an unfamiliar tune, and the kitchen staff served meals shaped like tiny cradles. Cale had no idea why. He sat on a sunlit terrace, still in his ceremonial robe, holding a mug of something hot and purplish that tasted like spiced apples and battery acid. A drone buzzed past his ear, scanning his face for what it called emotional stability metrics. Buzz off, he muttered, waving it away. The past 2 weeks had been surreal. Since the bonding ritual, everything had changed. Servants now called him Father of the Future. The council chamber had requested a genetic scan, and Valera had stopped avoiding him. They didn't talk about the ritual, but they'd begun having meals together. Breakfasts on the terrace, dinners under artificial starlight. Her walls were still up, but thinner now. She laughed sometimes, even teased him. It felt real, too real. He wasn't supposed to matter. This much. He heard her before he saw her soft footsteps on polished stone. Cale looked up and saw Valera walking toward him in a pale blue robe. Her hair was down, loose waves falling round her shoulders. You're up early, he said. I couldn't sleep, she replied, brushing a strand behind her ear. Something on your mind? Valera hesitated, then nodded. Something strange is happening. He sat straighter. Strange how? My body feels different. Energy, heat, movement. At first, I thought it was just after effects of the bonding. She looked down, pressing a hand to her stomach. But last night, I felt a pulse. A pulse. Cale stood, like a heartbeat. I don't know. But it wasn't mine. He stared at her. Are you saying? Before she could answer, the medical team burst through the terrace doors. Dr. Zentara led the way, scanning Valera with a wrist-mounted device. Her dark purple face was unreadable as she examined the data. Your Highness, she said after a moment, we must run a full internal scan. Immediately. Cale moved to follow, but 2 attendants blocked him gently. She needs privacy. One said. Cale stepped back, heart thudding. Is she okay? We don't know yet. Time stretched painfully as he paced the corridor outside the infirmary. The walls, usually glowing with soft pastel light, now flickered nervously. Finally, the door slid open. Valera stood there, pale, eyes shining, hands trembling. She didn't speak, just walked to him in silence, then placed his hand gently on her stomach. A heartbeat, steady, rhythmic, alive. Cale blinked. That's impossible, Valera whispered, but real. Dr. Zentara joined them, face stern but respectful. We've confirmed it. The princess is pregnant. 14 days since the bonding ritual. Cellular development is far beyond normal gestation. This is no anomaly. This is viable. Valera stared at her. But I'm infertile. Apparently not, the doctor replied. Whatever blocked your ability before, it's been bypassed, or healed, or Something else. Because of the ritual. Kale asked. Because of you, the doctor said, studying him. Your human biology interacts with superior genetics in ways we don't yet understand. Valera gripped his hand tightly. I don't know what this means. It means, said a voice from down the hall, you're no longer barren. The Empress stepped into view, robes glistening like molten gold, her face a mix of triumph and reverence. It means, she continued, our future has begun. Valera trembled. You don't understand. I spent years being told I was broken, that I was the end of a bloodline. This changes everything. Kale held her tighter. Then let it change everything. The Empress smiled. The news will spread. The Empire will celebrate. Valera turned to Kale, her voice barely a whisper. Are you ready for that? He met her eyes. They weren't strangers anymore. Not really. Not after everything. No, he said honestly. But I'll stand with you. A smile broke across her face, small, but real. She nodded once, and somewhere deep within her, a heartbeat continued to grow stronger. The palace was no longer quiet. What began as whispers became declarations. Holoscreens across the planet displayed Valera's image, her calm face beside flickering data projections of her pregnancy. The Empress addressed the Empire with her usual flair. The miracle we waited for is growing within my daughter. Humanity was the key. Our line will not end. Celebrations erupted across cities and orbiting stations. Fireworks bent around floating mountains. Choirs sang in harmonic resonance. Every gesture was grand. Every face turned toward Valera with awe, but not every face held joy. Behind closed doors, the council murmured. Noble houses whispered about purity, and one name came up more than any other. Lord Vortek, head of the Ancestral Purity Coalition. His family had ruled one of the outer provinces for centuries and viewed alien genes as contamination. Valera was summoned to the council chamber. Kale went with her, refusing to leave her side, though he was painfully aware that the only title he held was accidental husband. The chamber shimmered with tension. Representatives sat in levitating seats shaped like silver spires, rotating slowly as they spoke. Vortex stood before them all, tall and severe, his eyes fixed on Valera with sharp disgust. You ask us to embrace a child with human blood, he said coldly, when we haven't even confirmed its stability. Valera didn't flinch. The child is viable and strong. You were declared infertile, he snapped. How do we know this pregnancy is not ... a mutation? Kale stood. Mutation? Are you serious? This is not your place, outsider. Kale stepped forward anyway. You know what we call people like you on Earth, eugenicists. You're not protecting your people. You're gatekeeping a future that doesn't belong to you. Gasps rippled through the room. Valera glanced at him, her silver eyes narrowing with both surprise and gratitude. Vortek turned away. This council will decide. The session ended without resolution. That night, Kale sat on the edge of their bed, his hands still clenched in frustration. Do they seriously think you're carrying some kind of threat? Valera, brushing her hair by the mirror, spoke quietly. They fear change, and for them, this child is a change they cannot control. He looked at her reflection. Do you want this child? I mean, not for your empire, for you? She met his gaze in the mirror, expression unreadable. I never let myself imagine being a mother. That door was closed, locked, burned. Kale stood and approached her. But it's open now. Yes, she whispered, and it terrifies me. He gently took her hand, placed it over her stomach. It terrifies me too. Later that week, during a state dinner meant to honor the pregnancy, the Empress made a bold declaration. We shall initiate the hybrid integration program. Humans appearing children will be prepared for leadership roles within 2 generations. The applause was thunderous, except from Vortek, who stood and left mid-speech. That night, Kale couldn't sleep. Neither could Valera. I heard something, she whispered, sitting up in bed. Outside the chamber. He reached under the bed and grabbed the small energy blade he'd been given during consort orientation. Moving cautiously, he opened the chamber door. The hallway was empty, too empty. No guards, no attendants, no sound. A cold chill ran through him. He turned back toward Valera, just as the lights flickered. Alarms shrieked a moment later. Not celebration. Horns but invasion tones. Valera clutched her belly, panic in her eyes. Kale rushed to her side as the intercom blared. Security breach. Outer gate compromised. Royal family relocate to safe chamber. Repeat, this is not a drill. Valera gritted her teeth. It's Vortek. He's made his move. A loud boom echoed from deep within the palace. The ground trembled. Kale wrapped one arm around her and the other around the emergency locator beacon. We have to move. Now. She nodded, already rising, despite the pressure of 7 months of pregnancy. Another explosion, another cry from outside, as they hurried into the hidden corridor behind the chamber wall. Kale realized something terrifying. This child wasn't just a miracle. It was a threat, a symbol, a revolution. And revolutions always drew fire. The hidden corridor twisted deep beneath the palace, lit by pulsing emergency beacons. Kale supported Valera as they moved, her steps slow, heavy. The contractions had started minutes ago, irregular, but undeniable. We're close, Kale said, guiding her down the last bend toward the reinforced bunker. Just hang on, I'm not fragile, Valera hissed between breaths. Keep moving. Above them, muffled booms rattled the walls. Energy blasts echoed like distant thunder. Kale's heart pounded in his throat. He wasn't a soldier, but he knew what a coup sounded like. 2 royal guards waited at the vault door, weapons drawn. They snapped to attention as Valera approached, recognizing her at once. One placed his palm against a shimmering panel, and the massive doorway split open with a hiss of vapor. Inside, Empress Sarah stood poised like a queen preparing for war. Her hair was loose, her expression sharper than ever. Her belly had grown since Kale last saw her 8 months, and still carrying herself like a general. Daughter, she said, rushing forward. You're early. I'm aware, Valera groaned. I believe your stress-inducing government caused it. The Empress ignored the jab, leading her toward a reclining medical bed already surrounded by hovering instruments. Zentara is en route. You'll be safe here. Kale helped lower Valera onto the bed, brushing her damp hair from her face. I'm here, he said softly. I've got you. She gripped his hand hard enough to crush bone. You better. Outside, the situation worsened. Guards shouted. Shields activated. But within the walls of the bunker, all that mattered was the life struggling to be born. Zentara arrived, flanked by attendants carrying supplies. She took one look at Valera, scanned her belly, and said, active labor. 5 centimeters dilated. First child or not, she moves fast. Of course I do, Valera snapped. There's a civil war waiting for my son. Kale blinked. Wait, son. Zentara nodded. Confirmed. Strong heartbeat. Advanced development. Estimated delivery within hours. Kale looked at Valera. She didn't smile, but her grip softened. You said you weren't ready, she whispered. Neither was I, but this is ours. They labored for 6 hours, as chaos brewed above them. At one point, Empress Sarah herself stepped out of the bunker, armed with a staff that folded into an energy rifle. She returned 20 minutes later with a torn cloak, a bruise on her cheek, and blood on her blade not hers. You're fighting a coup, Kale said in disbelief, helping Valera through another contraction. I'm defending my grandson's birthday, Sarah replied without pause. As midnight approached, the contractions came faster. Kale never left Valera's side. He whispered encouragement, wiped sweat from her brow. held her hand through every wave of pain, and then suddenly happened. A final cry, a burst of breath, and then the room fell still. The only sound, the soft, wet gasp of a newborn's first breath. Zentara held the infant up, a son, healthy, hybrid, alive. Valera sobbed as the baby was placed on her chest, his skin a soft blend of human tone and royal violet. Tiny tufts of black hair curled against his scalp. When he opened his eyes, they were deep brown Kale's eyes. "He's perfect," Kale whispered. Valera looked at him, eyes red with tears. "We made him, you and me, before either of them could say more." The bunker door hissed open. A royal guard saluted. "The coup has collapsed, Your Highness. Vortek is in custody." His forces surrendered after hearing the prince's first cry, broadcast through the palace. "You what?" Valera exclaimed. Sarah smiled, smugly. "Symbolism is powerful. Your son has already saved a nation." The next morning, the palace stood quiet, scarred, but intact. Above the city, fireworks bloomed again. But this time, it wasn't for tradition. It was for a future no one thought possible, as Kale stood beside Valera on the royal balcony. Holding their son, he looked out at the horizon. "I came here for Chile," he muttered. Valera smiled, and got a dynasty. He looked down at the baby, then back at her. "No, I got everything I never knew I wanted." And somewhere deep in the stars, Earth turned slowly and aware that one of its own had just helped rewrite the destiny of another world.